I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. I took this picture this morning as I prepared for a swim in the Columbia River. I thought it was both beautiful and frightening. The last time I saw the sun look like that in the morning, wildfire smoke began pouring into the Portland area. And I know that some of you have been breathing wildfire smoke for a while, especially in Southern Oregon. But here we go in the greater Portland area and the gorge with smoke and wind and the danger of fire. A red flag warning is in effect, signaling high fire danger for Oregon and Southwest Washington. Here's a look at where those fires are burning across the state right now. The largest is the Double Creek fire in the far northeastern part of the state, and we're keeping a close eye on the Cedar Creek fire in central Oregon. The Double Creek fire has grown to well over 100,000 acres near the Idaho border. It's 15% contained. It was started by lightning. Evacuation orders are in place and dozens of structures are threatened. Lightning also started the Cedar Creek fire in central Oregon. It's 15 miles east of Oak Ridge. Since it started back in August, on August 1st, it's grown to 33,000 acres and it's only 12% contained. More than 850 fire personnel are on the ground and in the air working to contain the blaze. But the fire is on the move. It's being pushed by those east winds. The sheriff's office has ordered level 2 evacuation notices, meaning get set, for the towns of Oak Ridge, West Fir, and others in the area. The east winds are here and are expected to continue into tomorrow, creating that extreme fire risk. And that's why it's tonight's big story. The power companies in our area are on high alert tonight, cutting power to as many as 40,000 customers. It's for what's being called public safety power shutoffs, literally turning off the power to lower the risk of their power lines sparking a fire in these hot, dry, windy conditions. More on those shutoffs in just a moment. But we want to send things over to Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino for a look at how those winds are shaping up now and what's expected over the weekend. Matt?
You know, Pat, you mentioned the comparison to September of 2020 2 years ago, and there are some similarities. But there's some major differences, too, which I'll get to in just a second. Right now, this is live from Timberline, looking north at Mount Hood, and it doesn't look that bad. In fact, this hazy area that you're seeing here, that's dust. It's just dust getting blown in the air by the strong winds that are blowing up on Mount Hood, upwards of 60 miles an hour right now. It's cool up there because of the wind, and the wind gauge here is not working properly, but it's also very, very dry. But if you were standing at Timberline Lodge right now and you're looking up at Mount Hood and you're like, that doesn't look too bad. If you did this and turned around and looked south, this is what you would see. Looking to the south, there's a lot more smoke. It is beginning to settle down a little bit. You can see the top of Mount Jefferson now, where we could not see that before, but still a lot more smoke to the south, and a lot of that is coming from the Cedar Creek fire, as you mentioned down there. I'm going to show you that fire in just a minute from satellite perspective. The winds right now sustained at 28 at Portland. That's a strong wind. You get winds over 25, 30 miles an hour. It's a really strong wind. The gusts have been higher, and then the wind spreads out, comes out of the gorge over the Cascades, and then spreads south through the Willamette Valley, where the winds are also quite gusty, and even all the way out to the coast, where it's been in the 90s today. The peak wind gusts so far, Portland had a gust of 40 miles an hour. Fremont Bridge, 38. Same in Hood River. Vancouver just behind that. And then at the top of the Cascade Express chairlift at Mount Hood Meadows, just recording a gust of 60 miles an hour. So these winds are really, really strong, but they're not as strong as they were back in September of 2020, 2 years ago. Our air quality is moderate, which means the air quality index between 50 and 100. Back then, 2 years ago, it was like over 600. Big difference. Now, the wind forecast keeps the winds very strong overnight tonight. This is hour by hour, gusts in the 30 to 36 mile an hour range right through the overnight hours. Then they will begin to back off. Cascades and Gorge, 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts. The valleys, 30 to 40 overnight, but the winds will ease tomorrow. Now, one of the major differences, Pat, between this year and 2 years ago is 2 years ago, we had the Beachy Creek fire, we had the Lion's Head fire. Those were burning for weeks before the east wind set in, and those fires were very, very close to Portland. That fire map you just showed from InsaWeb, we don't have any fires in the Cascades that are close to Portland, so the sources of smoke aren't nearly as close. We're not getting that surface transport of smoke into the valley like we did 2 years ago, so it's not nearly as bad, even though your picture certainly looked eerie. Absolutely. Pat?
Thanks, Matt. Back in April, we told you about PGE's plans for potential power shutoffs in the hope of preventing wildfires. It has been a relatively light fire season so far, But now PGE and Pacific Power are both putting their power shutoff plans into action. The warnings for these power shutoffs last through tomorrow, meaning many people will be without power until Sunday, maybe even Monday evening. Let's take a look at who's affected. This is the PGE board showing the areas that are shut down now. So any of these colors that you see on the map shows where the power is out. So down in the south, Silver Falls City, also in the Silver Falls area, they are without power. Also in the Scotts Mills there. As we go a little bit to the north here in Clackamas County, you can see Estacada, pretty much the whole town, Sandy, and also as we go here to Corbett, the wind is just howling down the gorge here, and so there's a big concern that this east wind is going to cause all kinds of havoc there. So these areas are shut down as well by PGE, and then of course the wind as it comes in, their concern is that it's going to hit the West Hills, and so that's why they've shut down a lot of the power in these neighborhoods around the Forest Heights area. And then going farther to the west, out here in the North Plains area, Banks and Manning, that's all shut off. And moving back to the south now in the Forest Grove area, down to Gaston and beyond to the west of Carlton, and all the way down to the Shipley and Sheridan area, Willamina, Grand Ronde, those sorts of places. Those are all without power. It's a huge area and lots of people. 30,000 PGE customers shut off as of 1 p.m. this afternoon. Here's the outage map for Pacific Power, which is much more geographically diverse than PGE, which is concentrated around the greater Portland area. Pacific Power goes all over the west. So down around Diamond Lake, you can see they have shut down the power now, and in many places along Highway 138. So this is far to the south and in areas of Glide and Peel. Any brown on the map is where the power has been shut off for safety. As we come up now to the Sweet Home area, you can see there's a couple of areas in yellow. Those are areas that they're watching, and they may shut the power down, but they have not done it yet. This Cascadia, though, in the brown, that is shut down. And also part of the reservoir there, which is going to be disappointing for a lot of folks that I know that are trying to do a triathlon this weekend, tomorrow, right there. Hopefully that power will come back on, or they'll figure out a way to do it anyway. If you move up a little bit to the north, you can see that to the west of Lebanon and to the north, there's some more warning areas. And then if we go to the Santiam Canyon here with Niagara and Gates and Mill City, Mahama, you can see that a lot of these areas are shut down. There's some narrow canyons in there and a lot of blasting winds. So they want to be, of course, very careful about that. And as we look at the rest of the map, that is pretty much where those shutdowns are. Although if we come to the coast again, if we look to the west of Grand Ronde and then also into the Outage area, those are some more public power safety shutoffs from Pacific Power, trying to get ahead of these storms and the winds and not create any fire danger. This is a historic day for our area. The first time the power companies have shut off electricity in such a wide area to help prevent wildfires and images like the one you're seeing right here. As you might expect, the rollout was not perfect. Some of you got warnings that your power would turn off even though you're actually living outside the shut-off areas. Liz Morales lives northwest of Newburgh. She said she got 3 alerts yesterday and had to actually call customer service to figure out that she's living outside a planned cutoff area.
Okay, so I was reasonably assured I wasn't going to have a power outage, but just in case I watered everything, because as with most rural people that are in these areas, I'm on a well. I have a well pump. It's run by electricity. And if you have farm animals, you have pets, never mind the AC issue, water is kind of what it's about. I do have a generator, as many people do, but again, that's a whole nother thing of getting that started up. So it's no small thing to have a power outage. It's not like you just say, okay, I'll just go to a hotel. No. So you don't want to alarm people unnecessarily, which is one of my points.
She found the planned shutoff maps put out by PGE were baffling at first. The colors did not match the directions, and the terms active or not active were confusing to her. She's critical of the effort now because all of these warnings are bringing up frightening memories of 2 years ago.
Admittedly, I have a little bit of PTSD from September 2020 because I was 1 road away from evacuation from the Chehalem mountain fire. And that was terrifying. much more terrifying for the people who did have to evacuate. But for those of us who are on the cusp, having to go from room to room and figure out what can I get in my car, what do I need to take, and what am I willing to completely lose. So that heightened sensitivity makes me both appreciate and be somewhat scathing of this effort.
A lot of people probably have that heightened sensitivity. So how did we get here to the point of having all these shutoffs? Well, it's all in the name of safety. In 2021, the Oregon legislature required power companies to identify high-risk areas of fire and establish plans in order to prevent those lines from sparking the fires. Before that bill was passed, PGE had only one high-risk fire zone in all of Oregon. It stretched from the town of Sandy east to Mount Hood. PGE shut down that power area during a hot windstorm of early September in 2020, and there were no fires in the area, so that plan worked. But to the south, the same hot windstorm fueled the massive Beachy Creek fire that claimed 5 lives, hundreds of structures, and thousands of acres of land. A class action lawsuit accused a second company, Pacific Power, of playing a role in the blaze, arguing some of its power lines added to the fire because Pacific Power did not shut down power in that area. But after the legislature took action last year, instead of PGE having one high-risk fire zone, they are now 10. You can see the various colors on this map. And Pacific Power generated similar maps identifying 13 areas of high fire risk in yellow, including both rural and urban areas of Hood River, as well as the areas west and south of Medford. A few months ago, I hit the road heading to Corbett to talk with the Director of Wildfire Mitigation and Resiliency at PGE. We talked about these shutoff plans.
If the weather does turn and it has strong winds, low humidity, vegetation has low moisture content, and how our agency partners are positioning themselves, that is when we would have those criteria to say, let's turn off the power.
He told me tens of millions of dollars are being spent to keep tree branches away from power lines to try and avoid broken branches bringing lines down or tree limbs just falling and coming into contact with the branches and the wires. They told us work is underway to try and protect older wires as well, those more vulnerable to sparking a fire, but it's not an easy process.
You know, there is bare conductor, there is covered wire, which we call tree wire, and that is, you know, an insulation around the wire. So that is part of our strategy as well, but we're moving into that strategy. That is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take years for us to do those investments to minimize this risk for our community.
So there are some I think I heard what you're saying is there's some places that have that special covering when
yes.
You know it's going through a lot of trees.
Right.
But there are other places that have old wire that doesn't have that yet.
That's correct.
Okay. The company has remote weather stations in each of the high-risk fire zones to get constant updates on conditions in each location. And PGE meteorologists and fire experts are monitoring conditions from a new multi-million-dollar facility in the Portland area. That's where operators can kill power to a specific location with a push of a button. PGE tells us that assuming their systems are not damaged by the weekend windstorms, power restoration will begin Sunday morning and could be back up and running for everyone by Monday night. Now, if you want to check out the maps and see if your power could be shut off in the coming hours or days, we're here to help. Just text the word power to 503-226-5088 to get the latest updates and a link to the maps. You can also get the most up-to-date forecast on your phone with the KGW News app. That number one more time, text the word POWER, P-O-W-E-R, to 503-226-5088. Now to a story that sounds like it is right out of a movie, something like Ocean 11's. A group of burglars sneak into City Hall while nobody's looking and steal $1 million. And it's not until weeks after that someone realizes the money's gone. Sounds kind of dramatic, right? Well, guess what? It actually happened with cyber burglars, and the city of Portland does not want to talk about it. Cyber criminals are targeting cities and counties all over the country. And as investigative reporter Kyle Aboshi found, these attacks are hitting local governments hard and causing cyber insurance costs to skyrocket.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. It's Shannon from the Housing Bureau. The reason I'm calling is actually to alert you to the fact that there was a fraudulent wire transfer.
When Portland city leaders finally realized what happened, it was too late.
We had been infiltrated by bad actors through the city. There were it's a serious situation of multiple bad actors actually controlling internal emails for our staff, authorizing wire transfers.
This spring, cyber criminals made off with $1.4 million, the single largest heist of public funds in city history. Emails suggest that a city treasurer had flagged the $1.4 million wire transfer as potentially fraudulent, but the Housing Bureau paid it anyway after being fooled by cyber criminals who had access to the city's internal systems for an entire month. The breach at the city of Portland is just the latest cyber attack to hit local government. In the past several years, cities, counties, and school districts across the state have been targeted.
It's 24/7, 365, every day, all the time. It's nonstop.
Cybersecurity expert Patrick Miller of Ampere Industrial Security explains local government networks are attractive targets for cyber criminals because of the vast amount of sensitive data they hold. Additionally, unlike private businesses, local governments are less prepared for attack because of limited budgets or outdated technology used to protect against cyber attack.
It's a struggle for them. They're not in a really good position to kind of counter things like nation state level, cyber attackers. It's not, I won't say it's impossible for them, but it's very difficult for them.
In 2020, Tillamook County suffered a crippling ransomware attack where cyber criminals hijacked control of government computer systems, encrypted the data, and then held it hostage for 2 weeks until elected leaders agreed to pay a $300,000 ransom. One way local governments offset some of the risk and limit their exposure is through cyber insurance. KGW asked 20 of the largest cities in Oregon for a copy of their cyber insurance policies. 18 cities had coverage. 2 did not, McMinnville and Redmond. Our review also found, in many cases, cyber insurance costs have skyrocketed as attacks surge. In Portland, annual premiums jumped from $220,000 last year to $325,000 this year, a 49% increase. Bend's cyber insurance premiums went from $28,000 to $72,000, a spike of 156%.
It has been getting rougher and rougher to get cyber insurance, and it's becoming a national crisis.
Is it worthwhile for local governments to make this investment?
I think it is. I've done the numbers over the years.
Alan Shark, executive director of a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit, CompTIA Public Technology Institute, explains it's expensive to clean up the mess or restore a system after a cyber attack. Insurance companies are having to pay out more, which has led them to raise premiums and tighten standards for getting a policy.
Do you want to say, I'm healthy today and I don't need medical insurance? And the answer is cyber insurance is an important part, if you can get it, for all local governments.
But experts note cyber insurance is only part of the strategy. Local governments also need to invest in technology, software updates, and backup data, along with strict policies and training for employees to protect itself from cyber attack. Because often, it's just 1 or 2 clicks that can wreak havoc on a system and paralyze local government. Or in Portland's case, cost them $1.4 million. City officials hope to recoup some of that money through cyber insurance. Kyle Aboshi, KGW News.
Still to come on the story, the healthcare crisis happening right now in our hospitals across our region. Beds are full, staffing low, and experts say it's a problem that's been creeping in the shadows for decades. But are we past a point to fix it? That's next, when the story returns. If you've had to go to the hospital lately or bring a loved one in, maybe you've noticed it. There's a crisis happening throughout our healthcare system. Hospitals are short-staffed, beds are full, patients can't get in, or they have to wait a really long time. People in the healthcare industry are saying, in short, stay safe, stay healthy, because you do not want to have to go to the hospital right now. They may not be able to take you in. This isn't because of some new COVID surge, at least not directly. It is related to the pandemic, though. But the experts say the problems have been brewing in hospitals for decades. That's the topic of this week's Straight Talk. Laurel Porter sat down with leaders of hospitals in Oregon to find out what's behind this crisis.
We had a workforce that showed up, and they showed up in a big way in 2020 and did really hard work, and it became really hopeless work as hospitals filled up with COVID patients, and many of those patients didn't survive. That was really grueling. It was hard. It was many of them have said we feel moral injury. We showed up, we worked hard for these patients. They didn't survive. It was hard. It was morally hard. So I think we're seeing the impacts of that now, where people have just said, I can't do this work anymore. I'm going to go do something else. We're seeing staff shortages everywhere, but particularly in hospitals, it's been really significant. So that's been a huge problem. And then you couple that with the hospital financial losses. Hospitals' finances are pretty devastated at this point. So there are not the resources anymore to just pay contract staff indefinitely. Hospitals are facing bankruptcy if they don't get their financial house in order. So when you look at those two things together, they have really combined to create a crisis that I don't think any of us anticipated. I think we thought that we'd get to a point where the pandemic was ebbing. It would be over. Right. Things would go back to normal. And what we're realizing now is that there is no going back to the old normal. And now we have to chart a course for what the new normal looks like and how we have sustainable hospitals in our community under this new normal.
Well, that's a pretty grim situation, and they estimate it could take, get this, a generation or more to fully resolve it. Meanwhile, hospital workers say hospital leaders brought this on themselves by not making the right decisions on how to run the place. You can watch the rest of the discussion on Straight Talk with Laurel Porter tonight at 7 o'clock here on KGW or on our KGW YouTube channel. And we want to hear from you. If you had a hard time getting yourself or a loved one into the hospital, or are you a hospital worker seeing the problem from the inside? We'd love to hear from you, and we want to keep on following this. Send us an email to thestory@kgw.com or leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Up next on The Story, marine biologists are baffled by what's going on in the waters off the southwestern coast of Washington after a second large shark washed ashore this week. Theories from the experts coming up after the break. There's a big question swirling around in the world of marine biologists, and it's this. What is going on off the Pacific coast and the coastal ocean of southwestern Washington? That's a mouthful, isn't it? That's because for the second time in a matter of a few weeks, a thresher shark has washed ashore. And the latest shark to die on the sand tripped the scales at more than 300 pounds. Meteorologist Joe Ranieri tells us more.
Beachgoers near Long Beach, Washington came upon a big surprise this past holiday weekend.
The shark actually washed ashore in Ocean Park, Washington, so it's just north of Long Beach.
This thresher shark was massive, weighing in at more than 300 pounds.
It's one of the biggest thresher sharks that I've ever seen here in my time at the aquarium, and it was a little over 12 feet.
Tiffany Booth, who's the assistant manager with the Seaside Aquarium, says the shark died shortly after staff arrived. The shark was so big they needed help loading it onto a truck.
Luckily, there were a couple of beachgoers, a couple that had called in the shark stranding, and then a fellow from Montana and another guy from California. And they actually helped us get this 300+ pound shark in the truck.
What Booth doesn't know yet is how the shark died. But this is the second thresher shark in less than 2 months to wash ashore in the same area of Ocean Park.
There have been more up north, the Long Beach Peninsula. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that we're really interested in these sharks.
She says they have some theories about what could be leading to their deaths.
Dimoic acid. It's basically what's responsible for when they have to close the shellfish season, so clams and crabs. It's a type of phytoplankton that can build up in their system and create this dimoic acid that is poisonous to both us and other fish.
They're also looking at if warmer ocean temperatures could have something to do with it.
We often have threshers off the Oregon coast, especially in the summer. They follow that warm water current that the tuna do. And with, yes, our very warm ocean temperatures that we have, especially the surface waters, they're probably closer to shore than normal.
But what's interesting about these types of sharks?
They are one of few species that can actually raise their body temperature above that of the ambient water. This allows threshers to thrive in a very large range of temperatures and depths.
As for the exact cause behind the deaths of these two sharks just weeks apart, Tiffany says determining that could take some time. Joe Ranieri, KGW News.
And Joe tells us that the experts were able to rule out any kind of fisheries interaction, meaning the sharks were not hit by a boat or tangled in a net. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We'll wrap things up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching and being part of it. I hope you have a great weekend. Remember the story, our story? Well, that never ends. I'll see you next week.